Yeah, so today is the third lecture on the in the first course of optimization, and today's topic of discussion is modeling of optimization problem. So for that I have picked up a topic known as stochastic resource allocation problem. This problem is quite, I would say, dear to me. I really like this to teach this problem because it brings out many nice flavors of modeling. So there are three aspects in the optimization if you look at it. One is theory, you need to know that. Second is algorithms. Nowadays you have software support available for them. And the third thing is modeling. In fact, modeling is probably the first thing, but I have stated it as the third thing. In any domain, as an application engineer, probably many of you would be here thinking from the perspective of not only an engineer, any applier, could be in economics, could be in finance, could be in engineering, could be anywhere in any of these domains. When you want to apply optimization, it's your responsibility to model the problem. Once you have modeled the problem, and if you have been able to bring it to some standard form, then you can usually give it to some software to solve that problem. So for that there are many support available. For example, MATLAB has an optimization toolbox, then there is a GAMS environment, there is a Gurobi environment, there are solvers like Cplex and all that. So even I think Excel has some support on uh, linear programming and so on and so forth. So a lot of such support is available. You can use those toolbox and try to solve. And some of these things like GAMS and all that, they are also modeling languages. So they allow you to express your objective functions and constraints in a more nicer fashion. But yet modeling is always your responsibility and you need to model it properly. Now, I would like to say that modeling is an art. It's not just science. It's not just a set of rules. But if you take an example, like for example, you are on a sea coast and you have to paint. Let's say you have to paint a picture in which there is a sea coast and then there is a sea, and then there are supposed to be some coconut trees. And I tell you to draw a nice. You can imagine a beach and draw a nice picture around it. Each one of you would come with a different picture, and there some of those would be wonderful pictures, some of them would not be that great pictures, some of them may be bad pictures, and yet they are all representing sea coast there. But the amount of sunlight, the shades, the number of people on the sea beach, the color of the sand, the goldenness of the sand, the rocks, this is all in your imagination, and you would paint it there. Similarly, when you model a real life problem, there are a lot of features in the problem, and how well you bring them into your model and how amenable is your model to the computation tells actually how it tells about the quality of you as a your quality of optimization. So very difficult to teach, but you have to develop the intuition for it. But one thing which an instructor can definitely do is bring out to your notice nice good formulations, and then you learn out of it. Okay, so with this, today I have picked up stochastic resource allocation problem as an example problem, and I will motivate this problem again through the restaurant problem which we did in the first class. So what is it that we are trying to do? We are trying to maximize the net profit, which is PR1 x1 plus PR2 x2 up to PRN xn over for the restaurant owner, where x1 x2 to 1 to n are the items on his menu list, like vada sambar, idli sambar, paneer butter masala, and so on and so forth. And the level to which it is being done, that level is given by this x greater than or equal to 0. Everything is a non-negative quantity. You don't have -1 of samosas and so on. So this is what you have. and the constraint is this Ax has to be less than or equal to B. The B is the amount of resources that you have, like 10 kg of flour, 1 liter of milk, 100 grams of say, or 1 kg of salt, and so on. So this is the resource which was available to him, and Aij is the amount of ith resource consumed due to unit level of jth activity. So therefore Aij xj is the amount of resource, ith resource consumed for bringing the jth activity to the level xj, and if you sum it all over ai1 x1 and so on up to ain xn, then this is the net consumption of the ith quantity, and this should be less than or equal to bi, the amount available to you. So therefore in a kind of dot product format, ai transpose x has to be less than or equal to bi, and so a1 transpose x, if I put a x vector here, then a1 transpose x has to be less than or equal to b1, and so on up to am transpose x has to be less than bm. In this, ai transpose represents the ith row of the A matrix. So I have net consumption should be less than or equal to the available resource. With this thought process, I have now modeled my restaurant problem in a basically a linear programming format. So what is the linear programming format that I have here? I am trying to maximize C transpose X, which is nothing but summation of C1 X1 C2 X2 up to Cn Xn, which can be written as sigma I equal to 1 to n Ci Xi, subject to constraint Ax is less than or equal to B and X is greater than or equal to B. It's greater than or equal to 0. So why do I call this as a linear programming problem? Let me explain. C1 x1 C2 x2 up to Cn plus C2 x2 up to Cn xn is a linear or a affine function. Similarly, are these my inequality constraints? Ax less than or equal to b and x greater than or equal to 0. So this objective function is linear, the constraints are linear, so that justifies the word linear. Programming is a word which is coming more from the perspective that I am trying to draw a schedule, or and scheduling problems are like drawing a giving a program of things. So this is not in the sense of your C or C++ program, but creating a schedule for which optimization has been used maybe since last 100 years or so, and therefore this is called a linear programming problem. Similarly, you have a nonlinear programming problem also for nonlinear optimization problem. So that explains this term. The next thing is, if you recall, I said I'm going to introduce to you stochastic resource allocation problem, but so far I have talked of a deterministic resource allocation problem. So where is the randomness coming from? Now, if you look at column 1 of A matrix, that is like saying that for creating item number 1 at unit level, I need 50 grams of food, 20 grams of this, and so on and so forth. So that is the recipe. That is like, what's the recipe? That's the recipe. That's not going to change. What's going to change is essentially the profit that you are going to make for the unit level of that quantity. So what is the profit? The profit is price on the menu card minus the cost which is used for producing it. Now, if you have been visiting restaurant regularly, and I'm sure you are there, they give you a printed card, and the price doesn't change every day. But for example, the cost of vegetables change every day. So therefore the production cost is changing every day. So the profit becomes a random number. It is no more, the profit is no more fixed. So if that is the case, then the question arises that what should be what should be there in the objective function? And the answer is, of course, quite simple, not that difficult. You should take the average value of the profit and then try to maximize the expected, maximize the average profit that you are going to get. So therefore, we will try to maximize. So if let's say C1 bar is the mean for the profit profit corresponding to unit quantity of item 1, C2 bar is the mean value of the profit unit quantity of profit for item 2, and so on, then I should maximize C1 bar X plus C2 bar X and so on up to Cn bar Xn. So I should try to maximize this subject to this deterministic constraints. Alright, so you would say this makes sense. So like this, for example, my restaurant owner could draw a schedule which is valid, let's say, for next 1 month and come up with a plan or a program for the next one, solving the linear programming problem. But this has a lacuna. The reason I am trying to bring you out is, I said, the modeling should reflect the various facets of the optimization problem. So this has a lacuna. It entails a risk. To bring this out, I am going to consider another favorite problem of mine, which is about investments. And herein, I am talking of two types of investment. Let's say a very simple problem. I will say, I have 100 rupees of money and I give you an option of investing it in a fixed deposit and or buying a share of a particular company. That also I have decided which one. And I give you the data as follows. Fixed deposit will give you a return of 2%, and here this is going to give me a return average value return of, so C1 bar is 2% and C2 bar average profit here per unit rupee I am expecting 100%. That means 1 rupee will become 1.02 here, and here in the same interval 1 rupee will become 2 rupees. So how would you go? What would be your optimal solution? You have only 1 rupee to spend. So there are no two variables, x1 and x2, and x1 plus x2 is less than or equal to 100. Actually you could even write equal to 100, no problem. I am giving you 100 rupees to spend in these two portfolios, x1 greater than or equal to 0, x2 greater than or equal to 0. And this C1 bar is profit is 0.02 and C2 bar is 1. The answer is obvious to you, right? You will put all your money in the shares. Now this is what this linear problem will give you as your answer. But this is only average. But when 1 week down the line you go ahead and try to sell your investment and want to cash the profit, actually fixed deposit will give you that money. There is no risk entailed in it, but it is possible that the share market may have crashed, and though you expected profit of 1 rupee over 100 rupees, you expected profit of 100 rupees, but you may actually entail a loss. You may have to sell your shares at a lower price than what you bought for. So you may end up selling them at 98 rupees and entail a loss of 2 rupees. So then you would say, why my optimization problem formulation was so good? Why did this happen? The reason why this is happening is because you have not modeled the risk in your formulation. If you model the risk, then you would say, as some part of the fraction, maybe I want to push in the fixed deposit, some part of the fraction I want to put in the share, but now I don't know how to go about it because I have no idea of how to model the risk. So let's try to understand how we will go about modeling the risk. this C1x1 plus C2x2 here that I am showing you here, C1x1 plus C2x2 up to Cnxn, this is actually my profit or the worth called Z, and C1 bar x1 plus C2 bar x2 up to Cn bar xn is actually the mean value of the profit for a portfolio x1 to xn. The difference between the two, which is here C1 minus C1 bar times of x1 plus C2 minus C2 bar times of x2 up to Cn minus Cn bar times of xn, this is the spread which I am getting, and this is for one particular choice of the random numbers or one instance of the random numbers. But what I would like to do is reduce this spread, which means I would like to reduce the expected value of this modulus of this particular thing. So when I take a modulus, what I mean to say is I give equal weightage to profit and loss. In general, you may argue that no sir, let's give more weightage to means loss, less weightage to profit, but let's not right now get into non-symmetric formulations. But even then I have just put this modulus function. This problem now has to deal with non-differentiable functions, and dealing with non-differentiable functions, as I told you earlier, itself is a challenge. So can I frame this more in terms of functions which are differentiable? Can I quantify risk using functions which are differentiable? Answer is yes, I can do that. For that, I should look at the variance of the profit. So what is the variance of the profit? Z is the random number for the profit. Z bar is the random number corresponding to the mean profit. Z minus Z bar is the difference of the random number from your mean. Take the square of it and then take the expectation of it. Find out the average value of the square of the difference, and that is what is called as the variance of the expected variance of your profit. Now this variance Z minus Z bar square can be written as square of this particular summation, the C1 minus C1 bar x1 plus C2 minus C2 bar x2 plus so on up to Cn minus Cn bar xn whole square, or the square of, in compact form, the square of this particular summation I have written here. Now this thing has n terms, and when you square it, how many terms will come? N square terms will come. For example, you can look at this example. I square alpha 1 x1 plus alpha 2 x2 plus alpha 3 x3. I look at the square of it. So I will get terms like alpha 1 x1 square, alpha 2 x2 square, alpha 3 x3 square, then a term called alpha 1 alpha 2 x1 x2, then another term called alpha 2 x2 times alpha 1 x1, but since they commute 2 times of alpha 1 x alpha 2 times of alpha 1 alpha 2 x1 x2, then for 1 and 3 combination 2 times of alpha 1 alpha 3 x1 x3, and for the combination coming from the second term 2 times of alpha 2 alpha 3 into x2 x3. So 3 terms for the diagonal, 2 terms for each off diagonal, so 6 terms coming here, 6 plus 3 9 terms, which is 3 square. So I get, in general, as I said, if I have n terms here, then when I expand it, the square, when I expand it, the summation of n terms squared will give me exactly n square terms, and the n square terms can be captured by a double summation like this. Summation I equal to 1 to n, summation j equal to 1 to n, ci minus ci bar, cj minus cj bar, xi xj. And I mean, if you are more comfortable with programming kind of a terminology, then this is like nesting two loops for I equal to 1 to n, for j equal to 1 to n. First set sum to 0 and then write sum plus equal to ci minus ci bar into cj minus cj bar into xi xj, then first end for, then the second end for, and all your n square terms are there. So this first for loop is this summation, the second for loop is the jth summation, and then you have got this here. Now we have to look at the expected value of this. So expected value of this is the variance sigma square is the expected value of this, and therefore I take the expectation operator here. To be more precise, first I am looking at expected value of this. So I look at expected value of this inside this whole bracket, but then when I look at expected value of this inside the whole bracket, actually these are plus n square terms. I would have to look at the expectation of each one of them and then add. So I move this expectation operator here, so the e comes and sits here now in this particular term, and now in this I look at it carefully. Xi and xj are not random numbers. They are variables of the problem, no doubt. I have to fix those values, but they are not random numbers. I am going to determine them, but they are not random. So if they are not random, then I can actually move xi xj outside the expectation operator, and therefore write this variance as sigma I equal to 1 to n, sigma j equal to 1 to n, xi xj into expectation of ci minus ci bar into cj minus cj bar. This is the expectation that I am going to look into. I have explained this here more neatly, and this is the thing that you are looking into. Now, how many terms are here of this particular form? Expectation of ci minus ci bar into cj minus cj bar? N square. Why? Because I varies from 1 to n, and for each I, the j varies from again 1 to n. So there are n square terms here. Each term in general, I will write it as sigma ij, and this is also known as the covariance. To itself it is sigma 1 square, which is sigma 1 1, and so on up to sigma n square, which is sigma n n. This is the variance terms, and these are between I and j two different things, so we will call it as the covariance terms. Because n square terms are there, we can put it in a very nice covariance matrix, arrange these variances or covariances in a matrix form. The diagonals are their variance with the self, and the off diagonals are the covariance between the two quantities. Now this covariance is a symmetric matrix because this product here commutes. So therefore sigma 2 1 is same as sigma 1 2, and sigma n2 is same as sigma 2n, and so on. If you write x transpose vx, all right, then I'm writing it here. X in row format is x transpose in the row format is x1 to xn, and the vx is a column which is like sigma 1 1 x1 plus sigma 1 2 x2 and so on up to sigma 1 n xn. Then the second one will be sigma 2 1 x1 plus sigma 2 2 x2 up to sigma 2 n xn. The last one will be sigma n1 times, so you can imagine a x1 x2 up to xn vector here, sigma n1 x1 plus sigma n2 x2 up to sigma nn xn. So n terms here. Now when I expand it further, you will take x1 with respect to the first bracket which has n terms plus x2 into again the second bracket which has n terms, and then xn which is again the last n terms which are coming here. And so n terms like that, n times will give you a total of n squared terms, and so you get all possible combinations of sigma ij xij, which is exactly what I had here, is it not? Well, this is exactly what I had here in this. This is sigma I equal to 1 to n, j equal to 1 to n, sigma ij xi xj. So if the V is the covariance matrix, then the variance of the profit can be written as X transpose Vx. Because variance is essentially a square of something, you know that it is a non-negative quantity, and therefore X transpose Vx is always greater than or equal to 0. Recall, variance is the expectation of the sum of non-negative terms, so it can never be less than 0. It can be greater, it has to be greater than or equal to 0. That means the covariance matrix enjoys a very nice property which is called as a positive semi-definite matrix. This property is called as positive semi-definite matrix. A matrix A is said to be, and I am only interested in symmetric matrices, so I am saying a symmetric matrix A is said to be positive semi-definite if and only if X transpose AX is greater than or equal to 0 for all X not equal to 0. If the condition is, if we find that X transpose AX is strictly greater than 0 for all X not equal to 0, then I would say that the matrix is actually positive definite itself. Remember, if X is 0, X transpose X will always be 0. So I am emphasizing always that X is not equal to 0. This is important, that for all X not equal to 0, if X transpose X is strictly greater than 0, then A is a positive definite matrix. If it is always greater than or equal to 0, then it is a semi-definite matrix. These matrices have very important role in optimization, and I will have more to say about it later on. But right now, just remember that the covariance matrix is a positive semi-definite matrix. So now a risk minimization problem formulation could be given as follows. This is just a risk minimization formulation, and the formulation is minimize the variance of the profit, which is minimize X transpose Vx, subject to the same set of constraints. Ax is less than or equal to b and x is greater than or equal to 0. Now the thing is this a good formulation alternative to the previous one? Again, no. The first one did not look at the risk. This one only looks at the risk. Both are really speaking not satisfactory. Why? Again, let's come back to our investment example that we were talking of. I have gave you 100 rupees to invest in a fixed deposit with 2% return, which is deterministic, and this is risk prone, but in shares in a share of a company which will give you 100% return over the next 1 month or so. Now, because there is no risk here, this risk minimization problem, what will do? It will push all your investment into fixed deposit, and then you go and tell your client, you didn't like the last formulation, so here I am now giving you this optimization problem. The answer is put everything in the fixed deposit. He is not going to be happy. He doesn't want to leave this 100% also. So therefore, actually you want, if a better formulation would be something like this. For example, I want to minimize the risk, which is the variance, subject to my resource constraints. decision variables are non-negative, and I have some aspiration level. Arey Baba, I want at least 25 rupees to earn over the next 1 year or over this 100 rupees. Then I will call that profit as my aspiration level. So C bar transpose X should be greater than or equal to the Z bar, which is aspiration level of my profit Z bar, and then give me an investment which meets this aspiration level. It could even pay me higher, no problem, but at least meets this aspiration level with minimum risk. So minimum risk. So give me a formulation which is minimum risk but meets some aspiration level on the profits. This is this third problem seems to be third formulation seems to be better than the previous two. I am going to stop here for today. In the next class, I will develop this problem further and show you that how we can actually handle this risk aversion and profit in a much better economic way. All right, but you have to wait for the next class. Thank you.